Well, we're in week 2 of our Sermon Link series on emotions, and today, guys, we're talking about anger. I guess we should ask the obvious question. Isn't anger always wrong? Is anger always negative, always bad?
Well, the answer is no, and that might be a little bit surprising because I think in the Christian world specifically, or maybe in the home you grew up in, you were told not to get angry, don't be so angry, being angry is wrong, being angry doesn't seem very godly or holy. If that is your opinion, you probably haven't read the Bible very closely because God does get angry. Jesus got angry. And in Ephesians 4:26, the Bible says, be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil. So it says, actually be angry, but just don't sin. And so that's what I think we're going to dig into a little bit, that there is an anger, a righteous anger, an okay anger, a godly anger. But then there's, of course, a sinful response to anger too.
Okay, so let's talk. In the sermon, we talked about these 3 unhealthy responses to anger. There's probably more, but these are 3 really good ones. Yeah. And so even as we read through these and talk through these, why don't you think about which one is your normal response? Number 1, suppressive anger. Does anyone want to take that one? Do you guys suppress your anger ever?
Well, I never get angry, so I probably am suppressing it, right?
Yeah, that's
no.
right.
So this is the idea. You just stuff it in, you hold it in, you just tell yourself, I'm not mad. You just subsume it, sweep it under the rug, and not express it in any real way.
Yeah, and what the problem with suppressive anger is, I would imagine at some point it's going to give way to the second thing, which is explosive anger. You bottle it up for so long that eventually it comes out. And so, Scott, let me just assume you must be the guy who explodes in anger. Does that ever happen with you in your marriage or in parenting?
I would say it does happen. It has happened, I should say. I'd say specifically in parenting, I can think of some times. I think you can think of that explosive anger like a volcano, right? It just erupts. And, as good as I might feel in the moment to let that explosive anger out, very little good ever comes of it, And I love what the Proverbs says, Proverbs 29:11, fools vent their anger, but the wise quietly hold it back. And I just think of a lot of those times when I vented my anger explosively, I would have been a lot wiser to hold it back there. Not to suppress it, but to just kind of rein that in.
To find a healthier way to express it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have 2 ends of the spectrum, suppressive and explosive. And then we have this third thing that might need a little bit of explanation. In the sermon, Pastor Dave called it covert anger. Ross, what's that?
Well, it's the idea that you're angry, but you're not courageous enough or open enough to really express it to the person you're angry with. And so you find subtle ways to, dig them or to undermine them or whatever. People call it being passive aggressive. So your anger is real. You're not willing to own it, but you're acting on it anyway.
Okay, so those are 3 examples. Again, maybe you even can pause this in your small groups and talk about, who does what, which one is your anger language, if we want to call it that. But let's talk just on the positive side. Let's talk about how to respond in a healthy way. There are 2 really simple things that people can start to do if they want to respond in a healthy way. Number 1, we say in the sermon to make things right. What are we talking about there? Making things right.
Well, I think this has to do with righteous anger. Now you gotta be careful because a lot of times we can say like, oh, when I exploded at my wife or my employees, that was righteous. Maybe not, probably not. But there certainly is something called righteous anger when something's not right and you get really upset about it and you make it right. And I think a classic example from the Bible is when Jesus goes into the temple and he flips over tables and he makes a whip and he drives out the animals and all the people buying and selling in the temple, changing money. They're at the temple to make a profit where people are going to worship. And it makes Jesus angry. And it does make him angry, and he lets that anger lead to a good, positive change. And so, I think there's a lot of examples where maybe you get angry over injustice, you get angry over, something going on in your community, in your world, and you want to make it right. You want to take steps to make it right. That's a really good way to channel your anger.
Right, and when it's righteous anger like that, I think that's really the reason anger exists from God's perspective, is to impel us to do something that needs to be done. And so the wrong response would be, I'm worked up about this injustice, and I'm just going to watch TV and go to bed.
Right.
I'm not going to do anything about it. So we're saying make it right.
So this is being proactive about doing what you can. A lot of times you can't control, obviously, you can't control other people. You can't control the entire situation, but you're saying, hey, let's let's try to talk about what is a proactive thing I can do rather than just venting or being mad or frustrated.
Yeah.
I think that leads us to the next healthy response, which is to let things go. That's one of the best things that we can do. You know, it's so easy to hold on to a grudge, hold on to our anger. Sometimes we just need to let go of it and not hold it against someone.
Yeah, you know, the Bible talks about that. Ephesians chapter 4 says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you. And so, in other words, say, let it go. Let it go of your bitterness and your wrath. Now, that's not something you just do once and you're good. That anger comes back and then you let it go again. You keep committing yourself to letting it go.
So it seems to me the two questions that you can ask are, is there something I can do to correct the injustice, to make things right? But maybe the other question is there something I need to do just to let it go? Is it just time to let it go?
Right, because it might not be about an injustice at all. Maybe it's about an offense against me or something that I wanted that I didn't get, and so that's selfish. I just need to let it go and forgive, move on.
That's right. In Hebrews chapter 12, even, the Bible talks about the root of bitterness that can grow up inside of you. And talks about Esau, how he had that root of bitterness towards Jacob. And that ultimately led to his undoing. And that just image is so powerful for me that there comes a point where you can have anger over someone, what they did to you, but you end up hurting yourself, not them, by letting that bitterness go, or bitterness grow.
Right.
And the flip side of that is sometimes just to let it go. I appreciated the stat that was in the sermon of Dr. John Gottman said 69% of conflict never gets resolved in marriage. And so that means sometimes just let it go. Don't hold it against your spouse, you don't have to work out every little thing. Sometimes it's just better to say, hey, that happened. We still love each other. Let's move on.
Yeah, so use those questions below to talk about this. Again, if you want to listen to the full sermon, the audio for that is below as well. And don't forget to join us next week, because in week 3 of this series, we're going to talk about how to overcome the fear mindset.